This is episode 17 of the Strength Coach Roundtable podcast, a guest episode with rowing strength coach and outreach coordinator Frank Clayton of the Oakland Strokes rowing program. First, a message from our sponsors. Looking for ways to improve? Some guy named Gourley wrote a new book, I guess it's called The Movement of Rowing or something, to explain how movement limitations at the foot and ankle affect a rower's performance, technique, and health. I'm joking, of course. Blake is one of our co-hosts, and the book is excellent. It's loaded with self-screening strategies and solutions to help rowers reach their full potential. You can get the ebook for 30% off, which is about $9, with the promo code RowingChat. Follow the link from our sponsors page on rowing.chat/sponsors. Greg Benning, Sandra Rosendahl, and Gregory Smith have organized a month-long on-the-water challenge over the head of the Charles River course. It's called the Charles River GPS Speed Order, and you row the course in your single scull with something to record your GPS data, then submit it to Rosendahl and enter into the challenge. Your time on the course is automatically calculated and posted. The challenge starts June 1st and runs through June 30th, 2020. You can help us get the word out to rowers about this specific event, and the team is also offering to set up GPS speed orders for other clubs and venues so the rowers can get some competition in while staying safe during the pandemic. The event description and challenge entry page links are also on the sponsors page at rowing.chat/sponsors. Now, on to our episode with guest Frank Clayton. Hello and welcome to episode 17 of the Strength Coach Roundtable. I'm Will Ruth, rowing strength coach and author of the RowingStronger.com website, and I'm joined by fellow rowing strength coaches Blake Gourley of RowingStrength.com and that great book you just heard about, and Joe DeLeo of LeoTraining.io and the Leo Training Podcast. This episode isn't about us, though, as guest Frank Clayton joins us today to talk about his work with the Oakland Strokes rowing program in Oakland, California, where he is the strength coach and outreach coordinator. Frank is also helping to promote the Rowing for Blm Fundraiser occurring this Saturday, June 13th, with funds going to 4 different Black Lives Matter organizations. So we'll get into all of this today, from a strength training for a large and highly successful junior program to current events and how we can enact positive change in the rowing community. Frank, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for having me.
Yeah, so let's start by just telling us about yourself, your dual role at Oakland Strokes, and how you got into rowing before we start getting into the training talk.
Well, like you said, I'm the strength and conditioning coach, mainly for the varsity women, sometimes for the men as well, when they need one, and also the outreach coordinator. And it's really interesting how it came to be even involved in the sport of rowing so late in age, right? A lot of people start really early. I had no idea Oakland Strokes existed. I grew up in Oakland, maybe 2 or 3 blocks away from the boathouse. I am a personal trainer, or I was a personal trainer at the time. And a friend of mine who knew Blake Anderson, the great Beth Anderson from Oakland Strokes, who's well known in the rowing world. And she asked if she knew someone probably crazy enough to want to coach for such a large club. They didn't let me in on that secret. They just asked me if I was interested in coaching some rowers. And I'm always up for a challenge, learn new things. So I come down to the boathouse for the first time, and it's about 200 or so kids going every which way, right? Just helter-skelter, looked chaotic to me walking in the first time, but I quickly realized that everyone knew exactly where they were going. And so I, kind of observed, looked at the sport, decided I wanted to try and coach, and I've been there ever since, man, about 6-7 years now.
6-7 years. And you played football before, right?
I did play football. I played football, basketball. I've coached football, coached basketball. I've been a coach, been a player all my life in these other sports in the arena. Always loved athletics in general. Loved CrossFit, all that stuff at the time when I first started. And so this was something to learn, right? Figuring out the sport was going to be a challenge, but it was something I was welcome and open to, and I'm glad I did. I'm glad I wasn't scared away the first day.
Yeah. And so what was that first year like? Did they throw you into it right away with, launch ride-alongs and that kind of stuff?
So they just threw me in there. It was no real direction. And they trusted, she had some background on who I was as a trainer. But I will tell you this: the first year, everybody was doing football workouts, right? That first year, like just sticking to what I know. It was pretty interesting. They all kind of did football workouts. But I kind of observed and learned, and, you know, I checked in with Cal's not far from us. So Cal has some great trainers, and just kind of learning the sport and studying and realizing the body type it takes to be successful at rowing. Rowing is very, very, very unique, right? You need the power of football. You need the endurance of soccer and basketball, or soccer, and then the explosion of basketball. So all of these different dynamics that the body has to kind of create over time creates a very unique rowing body and rowing demand for strength and power. So the first year was ugly. First year was definitely ugly.
What are there elements of that first year that you've kept in your training now? Like what from that football or multi-sport background, like, I guess, did you find was particularly lacking in rowers' physical development, and also what did you keep in?
So we definitely kept in things like back squats, and some of the power lifts, right? Some of the deadlifts, the cleans, not as heavy as you would with football, things like that, definitely. But what I noticed with a lot of the female athletes is the explosiveness wasn't necessarily trained into their program. Now, I will say, before I got there, Oakland Strokes has a outstanding reputation as athletes, and of championships and all this great stuff. And so I was there just to take it up a notch, right? Started working with the novice, and eventually sometimes with the varsity. The coach at the time wasn't big on weightlifting. And so eventually, right, the program, the coaching structure changed, and the coaching philosophy changed. And so then weightlifting became a bigger part of the program. Hi, bud. I told you, it was a matter of time.
We were warned that there might be a Zoom bomber in real life.
But and so so you know, some of those elements, definitely the powerlifting, we kept in, and then, you know, just over time started to incorporate some of the CrossFit elements to it, and some of the definitely plyos. Plyos is always good. We do a lot of plyos, and all of that good stuff. Yeah.
Cool. And so, just to sort of set this up for the audience more, you've got how many athletes potentially training in a season at Oakland Strokes?
Ooh, so women usually about 100 or so, and
between novice and varsity.
Between novice and varsity, and then the guys about the same. So we usually have anywhere between 175 and 225 athletes.
And it's a juniors only program, right?
Juniors only, right? We don't do masters rowing. We start at 8th grade or 6th grade because we have a middle school program, and then we go up to seniors.
And do you have your own sort of weight room facility at Oakland Strokes that everybody uses, or is it all stuff in the boathouse, or how's that work logistically?
Well, so yeah, we have a what we call a dungeon. So it's actually it's kind of, so our boathouse, we have a really nice boathouse that Oakland Strokes and the East Bay Regional Park District collaborated on. Was able to build a beautiful facility out at Tidewater Boating Center in Oakland, and in the back of the boating center, there's a particular area where we have some Olympic lifting racks, plenty of dumbbells, and then our parent volunteers, who are awesome, created these nice long, they're like concrete, they're poles with concrete cans, coffee cans on the end. So they're like barbells. And so a lot of our athletes use that. With the women's team, we use them a lot more earlier. Now we do a lot of dumbbell stuff because it's easier to scale, right, for athletes. All the bars are the same weight. And so you get a girl that's 110 pounds and a girl that's 150 pounds doing the same weight. That doesn't always work out well. So I've moved a lot more to dumbbell work with the women's team. The guys, tough luck for them. They just got to get in where they fit in. They got to all use the coffee cans or the Olympic bars. And so we actually are fortunate because I know a lot of clubs don't have a lot of stuff that we have. We have medicine balls, we have space to do all this stuff, we have mats and things like that. So it's a challenge to make it all work with so many athletes, but we have figured out some creative ways to make space for everyone to train at once.
Frank, I got a question for you. So you mentioned some of the youngest age groups you're working with are middle school athletes. So I'm guessing somewhere around 8 to 10 years old, or 10 to 12.
I think, yeah, probably about, I want to say around 12 or so is the
Okay.
youngest. I don't particularly train any of the middle schoolers. On a rare occasion, there'll be one or two on land because everyone went out and there wasn't a boat for them. But that's very, very, very rare. Or they're not up to going out that day, something like that. They just want to hang out and work out with the novice team.
Sure. So my question is, the athletes that you're working with, are they pretty, green, like novices to strength and conditioning, or do some have experience with weight training, or are you kind of working from a blank canvas, so to speak?
Absolutely. It definitely varies. The beauty of being there and seeing kids go from middle school to to off to college is to watch them develop into this like flimsy, flapping all over the place little kid and running around smiling, cracking jokes to this really hardcore, serious athlete. It's a beautiful thing to watch. But yeah, most of the kids come in. Some have played another sport before and, came and visit the boathouse and checking out the sport of rowing because a friend of theirs started, and they're just kind of hanging out. But a lot of the times, most of the time with the novice is really taking them from point A on and teaching them, body mechanics, teaching them, proper lifting techniques, teaching them how to eat, kind of speaking to them in all those different aspects. Now being an athlete, like I said, a lot come in, if they haven't been an athlete of rowing before, they sometimes have had some sports involvement, but many times that's not the case.
Sure. And so where do you like to start? Like philosophically, where do you think's a good, entry point for them at that age? What do you want to try to emphasize from a, movement skill or strength training standpoint?
Yeah, I really like to get them comfortable in their body first, right? So body awareness is big. Especially because you're not always going to have me cueing you. So I want you to know and be in your body when you're training, right? So really knowing what it feels like when you have an arched back and we don't have mirrors down there, right? So we need you to be in good posture, all of that kind of stuff first. And then I start to build inside out, right? Really strong core. Right, core stability, all of that great stuff. It's really interesting. It's much different for the male and female athletes. I really have to pound the female athletes on core work because just structurally, they seem to have a few more back injuries than the male athletes. But definitely core, and then I build you out from there.
Excellent. That's
Joe's
great.
a big fan of the proximal distal strategy, right?
Yeah.
That's right, man. That's right. Proximal stability for distal
Right.
athleticism.
And there you go.
What you said is interesting about like teaching the athlete to feel what it feels like to be in their body. I think that's something that a lot of rowing coaches could forget, especially because the performance environment of rowing is so different. Like I used to coach high school lacrosse and I was also coaching rowing. And when I was coaching rowing, it was like so weird to send athletes off from the start line and say, okay, have a nice race, see you in 45 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Like no opportunity to call timeouts, no like huddle, no half times, just all right, see, let's hope it goes well.
Good luck.
And that has to do from like a strategy perspective, a performance psychology perspective, and from a physical perspective, because you can't be there with the bullhorn in the race saying sit up, sit up, sit up. So I think this is an opportunity that strength coaches really have if we tune into it to teach those different physical positions so athletes can carry that over when they're on the water. I think not having mirrors, that's awesome, because then they actually have to learn how to feel it instead of just looking for it.
Yeah, definitely. And it's one of those things. It's like you'll be so surprised. And I know you guys know this, when you'll tell an athlete to do something and they swear they're doing it. Like they just know they're in the position that you showed them, and their brain is telling them this is the position, right? And you're like, no, it feels like this, and they can't see it sometimes.
We did an exercise at one of the Olympic development programs last year, where we had a coach on the erg and the athlete giving them instructions, and the athlete would say like, bring your hands up, and the coach would like raise his hands over his head.
Yeah.
Just like, I'm doing it, coach. Blake, sorry, I saw you had something you wanted to say.
That's all good. Frank, when I was working with Los Gatos, I worked with men and women, but mostly men. And the biggest difference I saw was like men were very inflexible, and then the women had extremely weak cores, or just not where I wanted them to be. You already touched on core. Do you see that difference? Do you see anything else as like the biggest limiting factor for men and women or rowers in general?
Yeah, I think the flexibility portion, definitely for men, right? Tight hips, all of that good stuff. And normally our lats are really tight, that, kind of causes the back issue, especially when you're in coming into the catch. And so really focusing on mobility, right? I love the supple leopard, and all those beautiful things that book brings to the mobility aspect of training. And so we incorporate a lot of that when I work with the male athletes, but surprisingly, and sometimes it's the exact opposite with the female rowers. They're a little hyper flexible. And so a lot of gymnasts, right, past athletic experience comes in. So they get the big anterior rotated pelvises. And when I'm asking them to do squats, trying to keep that pelvis tucked in as opposed to pushing the hips back, all of that kind of stuff. So really, like I said, that body awareness is so important, especially for those hyper flexible athletes. But definitely, you can see the inflexibility of the male athletes.
That's a really good point on being hypermobile, because people always are focused on improving mobility, and I would say that I've gone too far with it sometimes too. And you can actually be making things worse, right?
Yeah.
Frank, one additional question I had for you, just regarding your experience working with football and some of the other sports that you've coached, both as an athlete and as a coach. Are there anything that you like to kind of pull in from those sports that, a rowing athlete may not necessarily be doing, in their sport, that you feel kind of adds to the athleticism or athletic development for them?
Well, the funny thing about rowing is, no disrespect, because I know you all are rowers, it's the most athletic sport you have to be, right?
We all knew where you were going, right, as soon as you started that.
That's right.
Go one direction, two directions, I guess, the whole time, right?
Sitting down.
Right, sitting down at that. So I like to train. So the one thing about what I always want to make sure, we practice 6 days a week, most weeks, and then some. As you get into the sprint season, we move it up to 7 some of the months, right? And so overtraining is always a concern for me, especially with high school athletes. So a lot of times we won't do any frontal plane movements. We'll do a lot of transverse movements. We want to make sure that we're training the muscles that we aren't using as much, so that they are able to support all of those muscles that they're going to be using on the erg, they're going to be using in the boat, and not forgetting about the muscles that help stabilize them for those movements, so that they maintain structurally in an efficient way as far as the entire body, and not just the muscles we need, right? Heavy on the quads and all that stuff. So I try to make sure, like we do, karaoke, we do medicine ball toss, all of that stuff with the twisting and turning. Have a ladder out there sometimes. I brought a sled out before. They almost died. They hated that sled. Just little stuff like that, right? You probably, I don't know any other programs that uses a sled, but we like push the sled like football, because I just think it creates that dynamic mobility and power and strength all incorporated into one. So we definitely try to train the whole body.
Nice. When they're rowing 6 or 7 times a week, how many times are you strength training?
So we probably right now we do 3 or 4 times a week, right? It was a lot more in the past, but yeah, availability. And we just had them rotating. Actually, with that many athletes, right, you can rotate on days. So
so you have like 7 sessions a week, but not necessarily 7 rowing sessions a week. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Some days they would stay. You have a land day. So this is your land day to erg and to train, do all that stuff, and then the next day you be in the boat. So we have, we are able to get with that many athletes, you can get 4/8s on the water and 4/8s on land, and kind of rotate your system that way. It's nice when you have a lot of athletes.
Yeah, that's a lot of athletes. Are there other differences between female athletes and male athletes that you found pretty consistent that you really try to train for? I mean, in terms of like different exercises you use, or different ways that you load the athlete, like more heavier work or more rep work, or just anything like that? That's always a question that we get a lot, because rowing's unlike other sports in that 2,000 meters is 2,000 meters, regardless of whether you're in the male boat or a female boat. But obviously, like, there may be physiological and biological differences beyond that affect the training.
Yeah. So with the female athletes, we definitely, we start with high repetition, low weight, and then we build in high repetition, high weight. Right, which is not, and it's not the highest weight that they can actually manage, but we usually get pretty heavy, but don't lose any of the reps, right? So I really try to, because that's the uniqueness of rowing, right? There is no stroke off. And so you have to go heavy and hard for longer, which is not the traditional, traditional strength training and weight training. It's like high rep, low weight, heavy weight, and lower rep, right? But I find the rowing, you got to be able to do both. And like I said, we don't go full, 1 rep max weight for 20 minutes, but we'll go pretty intense, and building them into it, taking them step by step. If we go up 5 pounds, it's not as disastrous, right? Once you go from 5 pounds, and you can get up to 30 if you change it incrementally. And that's usually how I start to program through the season. The other difference is the psychology of it, right? The mentality around training. And I always get this every year from someone. I don't want to look like a boy. I don't want to be muscular. I don't want to be, that type of
too bulky.
Yeah, I don't want to be too bulky, right? And so it's like, okay, I'm going to get you strong. If I can get you strong, I don't have to get you bulky, right? I just want you to be strong. And there's a particular way you can lift that'll get you all bulky like that if you want to, but we're not doing that. We're going to get you strong. But the other aspect of that is, I think there's a different relationship that women have to their body than men, but also just an approach to training. Usually the guys, I can just throw them against the wall, pick them up and slam them down again, and all is well. The women, or at least some of the female athletes, it takes a little more finesse. And so I don't always tell them what we're doing for the day. And it depends on age and like just dealing with junior rowers in general, right? That emotional, there's definitely a lot more management of emotions from a day-to-day, living a teenage high schooler life, right? And then coming in and focusing on training intensely. Our athletes do a great job. They're great teammates. And so I don't have to do a whole lot of that. But there are times where you have to focus on, and I have to be aware of, this might not be the day to push, right? This might not be the day to just, hey, we're going all out and crazy. This might be the day to, check in. And I don't think we always do that with male athletes, even though we should, because it's not like we don't deal with stuff emotionally, mentally. And so that's probably the biggest difference. I think they are more aware of where they want to go and want to be, and they are able to relay that to me for that day. Like, this is not the day for me to just go out of my mind on training. So that's kind of one of the biggest things.
Cool.
Between the two.
Just to backtrack a little bit, when you said high rep, like how high are we talking for, like, what's an advanced female junior athlete doing in terms of like high rep, high weight?
Oh yeah, there's times we'll go sets of 50, right? We'll go sets of 50. What I like to do sometimes is a ladder. We'll go 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, then 40, and then back down the other side.
And with a loaded exercise the whole time, or
with the loaded exercise. So if we're doing, say we might combine, we might do a 3 exercise set, right? We might do a chest press, a lat pull, and a dumbbell curl, right? If we're doing upper body, and we'll do that ladder up and then that ladder down, right? Or we'll do a squat jump, and a deadlift, same thing, just with lighter weights. One of my favorite things to do with them is actually a workout my buddy Andre Ammons, owner of Down Sports Fitness, who was a U.S. track athlete, had taught me. And it's a 3-set dumbbell squat, dumbbell squat and squat jump, right? So you start with 3 sets of dumbbells. You got your light, I call them your baby bear, mama bear, papa bear, right? You got your 3 sets of dumbbells, and you start off and you do 10 squats with your heaviest, and then you step back and do 20 squat jumps. And then you go up 15 squats with the middle, 15 squats or squat jumps, and then 20 squats with your lightest, and then step back and do 10 squat jumps. So it's always equal 30 reps in that set, and you do that 3 times, and you're trying to do that in under 8 minutes, right? So 3 sets through in under 8 minutes, and it is, no matter how many times you do it, it just burns you up.
What would your strongest athletes be using, like, for weight on that?
On that, for the female athletes, probably about 25 to 30 on the heaviest. Mm-hmm. And then, we'll set up say 30, we'll go 30, 20, and maybe 10.
And just on like a dumbbell squat kind of thing.
Just a dumbbell squat.
Yeah, okay.
Dumbbell squats. I advise all 3 of you to try it, right? Yep. When you get off, all right, the rep count is always 20. You start off 10, 20, 15, 15, 20, 10.
The math might be the hardest part for me.
Yeah. Whenever I explain it for the first time, everybody's like, wait, what? Yeah, and then it makes sense. And everybody's like, oh, okay, I get it. And then
or you get a partner to count.
Yeah. And then the timing of it, mm-hmm. like to be able to beat the time. I usually am a little more generous when we first do it, because like mid-second round is when it hits you. And then it's like, oh, okay, I still have a whole another half of this to go, and my legs are about to fall off. All right, shout out to Andre Ammons, man. He's a dynamic trainer.
So we could sit here talking about training for all afternoon, but there are more important things going on in the world right now than sets, reps, and squats. And we did invite you on here to talk about current events and being a change maker in rowing as well. So maybe that segues well into talking about your other role with Oakland Strokes as outreach coordinator, and just tell us about that and your perspective on things.
Yeah, outreach coordinator. I've been an outreach coordinator for about 4 years now. I actually took over for Jessie Blake when Jessie was leaving, or right before she left. And it is one of those positions that's really rewarding. We row in the city of Oakland, and we have very few athletes from Oakland. We have 0 athletes of color from Oakland. And so it's really important to kind of bring this community where I'm from. And the reason I really wanted to become the outreach coordinator, so I was so happy that they had the position become available, is because I always tell people when I first meet them in person and we start talking about rowing, I always tell them a story. I tell them I was the coxswain of the 2020 Olympic team, right? And they always kind of look, and it's like, well, I could have been, I should have been, but I didn't know about rowing, and it was right down the street from my house. And I would think I would have made a great coxswain, right? I always say that, right? I'm an athlete, but, I might not, I think I would have been a great coxswain. And so it's really intriguing, really upsetting that I really didn't know about the sport at the time. And so being able to go out into the community, and we do a lot of middle school visits, and right now into the high schools, really being able to share the opportunity of rowing earlier with folks from the community that I'm from is amazing. I really enjoy it.
And so that's mostly about getting out there in front of those programs, getting kids younger, bringing the ergs to school, doing erg ed, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so we do erg ed, partnered with the Pocock Foundation, which is awesome, amazing program. They created erg ed, so we teach erg ed in middle schools. We got a couple of different things going on right now. We just started a program at Arise High School. It's been a real challenge to get some traction from some of the youth in the community to actually try it. And there's a myriad of obstacles to get it to actually stick, right? We get kids down all the time who will visit the boathouse, who come see the sport. We've had even some join the team, but it's been a real challenge. So we've actually started a program at Arise, which is almost a separate thing. So they have their team, they come down to the boathouse, they use our equipment with the hopes of transitioning them into the competitive team. And then we just started a partnership that's in the making, excuse me, with Oakland Unified School District to create a indoor middle school rowing league, right? So that introduces them to the erg, right? Because you got to fall in love with the erg first before you ever really love this sport. And so that program will come up in the fall 2020. And we got to figure out how to, with the changing climate, how to make it work.
Frank, it's sad to hear that there's so few people from Oakland when you guys are actually in Oakland. Mm-hmm. What do you think the biggest limitation is, or like what is the biggest boundary to getting local children from Oakland involved in the sport of rowing?
I just think there is rowing is a stranger to a lot of sports. There's also, there's so many challenges. The challenge around water, right? Not a lot of water sports in Oakland. And so Oakland has, just as a city, has had a few, this is not something that necessarily affects everyone, but definitely the school district and the city as a whole has had a few water deaths of athletes, not in their sport, but different athletes who have gone out and, over the past couple of years. So that's one thing, right? That barrier of water, but it's really just the knowing, getting the information out there, getting familiarity with the sport. And then just to be honest, there's not a lot of people that look like me in the sport in general, right? And so getting kids out there and comfortable and making rowing familiar enough to be able to try it, right? You're stepping out on new ground. You're stepping out on something that you've never done before and that no one has done before. And so it's a little challenging, especially as a, middle school, high school athlete, to step out there and say, I want to do it, which is why I'm so excited about the Rise team, because we realized that was a challenge. We would have kids come down, they would, row for a little while, and then they would disappear because they just couldn't get comfortable, right? And everyone's coming from everywhere else. So it's also like no one is from my city, just all of those things, this different social economical differences that they just couldn't get comfortable with, and we try, so we're trying different things to get kids to stick in rowing. And I think just once the level of comfort gets there, and like I said, it becomes commonplace, I think that more athletes will stay.
One of the barriers has to be cost, right? Because we were poking around on the Oakland Strokes website and happened to see that it's what, $2,000 a semester for the junior team. I mean, that's like you get the great boathouse, you get the strength training facility, you get the qualified coaching staff, you get the 4/8s out on the water, the 8/8s of athletes. But I mean, that's a barrier. Are there things that Oakland Strokes has been able to do to lessen that barrier for people, or is that still something you're working on?
So the beauty of Oakland Strokes is we have great parents, we have great alumni, we have great contributors, all of that stuff. So a lot of times, our motto is, if you want to row, we can find a way for you to row if you're from Oakland, right? And so luckily for us, we haven't had the burden of like running out of scholarships. And so the financial aspect of it is we can find a way for you to row. We have all kinds of scholarships available. It's really filling the spots, filling the athletes, getting them out there to be able to utilize some of the resources that we have. Like I said, we have it's a great opportunity. And the challenge really is getting kids down and comfortable enough. Sometimes, right, where Oakland Strokes is, where our boathouse is, there's not a lot of public transportation, right? So that's another barrier, actually physically getting to the boathouse. So all these little things that can be worked on, we are, but if it's not one thing, it's another for that particular athlete. And so, having the perfect storm of all of the needs being met is really what we're trying to figure out a program that does just that. But yeah, definitely, people see the price and be like, wait, can I do that?
But that speaks to the value of having somebody out in the community saying, yes, you can do that.
Yeah.
That may be there on the website, but hey, we're willing to work with you. Here's what we could do. Here's all this other stuff. There needs to be that advocate in order to make it work.
Yeah, and I get so excited and passionate, and like when I go, I talk to them like I rode before when I was their age, because I really do wish I did. But for me, it's really challenging them to step outside of their comfort zone, because I believe that's something you have to do in life, right? Even as adults, like if we're not willing to challenge ourselves or to take risks or to take chances, then we miss out on opportunities, right? And so when I go into schools, I tell them this is not about like I want you to row, I do, right? But I really want you to just check it out and see if it's something that you want to do, right? Because you get kids that hide in the back of the classroom. Maybe they kind of want to do it, but they don't want to be the only one, or they don't want to be the first one to do it. So my goal really when I go is for them to just come and try, right? If you take the first step to try, then that becomes a habit. And so then when you have that opportunity to start the business when you get older, to maybe go away for college when you get older, all of these little things that are going to be scary, you can remember like, oh, that guy told me that this would happen, right? There's going to be a time that I'm scared to do something. And this is where the reward comes in, when I'm brave enough to take that chance.
Frank, really, really awesome points. And I'll say that even though I obviously looked like everyone that I rode with, or at least the majority of people that I rode with, like even I had to be forced to do it. So like getting people to take that risk, like actually might create this passion and might start to take that step to start to create a change. I wanted to, because I think it's important, I wanted to kind of shift a little bit more towards the protests and the movement that's going on right now. Mm-hmm. And from conversations I've had and from a few people that I've seen, even though it does seem like the vast majority of people are understanding what this is all about, equality, accountability, etc., I do think people are getting distracted from what the main cause is. Mm-hmm. And I was just wondering if you could explain to people who are maybe confused or maybe to reaffirm what people agree with is, like, in your mind, what is the main movement or main message of this movement?
So Black Lives Matters, to me, for me, means a couple of different things. It definitely means accountability. It definitely means recognizing that all are worthy of humanity. All are worthy of recognition. Yeah, their humanity is recognizable, but definitely accountability. I mean, we have a history in this country in general that we just can't seem to take accountability for. But this movement, for me, is really the reckoning of that, and the rising up of people who say that we are tired of being treated unfairly, right? Being treated by not by necessarily by individuals, but definitely by a structure and a system that has benefited from treating people differently and unfairly. And it feels like there's a shift and a change because this is something we've never seen before. And it's really interesting. And it's almost seems like this pandemic has been a blessing because we've been able to stop long enough for people to say, hey, and kind of check in and really, and I think the George Floyd situation, which is terribly and horribly sad, felt like the last straw for a lot of people. And like I said, people got time right now. They like, hold on, let's get some real traction on the ground around changing, making some lasting change. And then that emotional contagion just kicked in and people realized like this is a grand opportunity and it's been a grand awakening for people to get stuff done.
It's time, and it's 40 million unemployed too. If your previous excuse for not protesting was, oh, well, I can't because I have a job, then it's sort of, well, the pandemic took that layer of excuse away.
Yeah, absolutely. Like yeah, people definitely got time. But the interesting thing is that, and so this is where I am optimistic, but I'm also really questioning the momentum of this movement, right? Like you said, we don't have distractions now. Well, what if the distractions go away? How do we keep this going? How do we sustain this? And this, in the rowing community, right? Predominantly white community, somewhat affluent of a sport. And if you find yourself as someone who wants to, help sustain, become what we call an ally, all of that good stuff is really, about learning, checking in, seeing what is appropriate, what are the needs of the people, what is the demand. That's why I appreciate that question so much. And like I said, I don't speak for all Black people, but I do know that, just being accountable, really recognizing, learning, and growing as a non-person of color, what they can do is educate themselves, check in with the community, recognize and admit how they benefited from the current structure. And that is really how we move forward. I forgot the lady's name, Dr. Jane something or other, does great work. I cannot remember her name. I wish I could. Someone will come over.
Frank, are you thinking of Jane Elliott? Is that who you're?
Possibly. She's
of the eye color experiment. Is it?
That's what I
she's
was
a
thinking
research.
of.
She's a behavioral scientist.
It might be. Yeah,
It might be Jane Elliott. She's been doing it for years. But her experiment, when she asked, how many of you would are aware, and how many of you would want to be treated the way African Americans are treated, right? Nobody raises their hand. And she says, that means you are fully aware that there's something wrong with it, right? And so just realizing like we just haven't been awake and aware enough or willing enough in the past to say this is not okay. I think that people coming out now and saying that this is not okay for them is amazing. And we're just keeping that momentum, but changing stuff from a policy level, from a law level, is important, but working on oneself is where you can start, but definitely want to put some systems in place.
Frank, I think that's an excellent and very important point you just made. And one thing I'll share is I was talking to a colleague of mine, a friend in California, Denzel, and we were discussing that YouTube video, Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes by Dr. Jane Elliott, that we were just mentioning just now. And I said, I wasn't even aware of, her research or that video that's probably, over 50 years old now at this point.
Yeah, it was
around there.
Right after Martin Luther King was assassinated.
Right.
Was when she did that. Yeah.
And he said, he said, we watched that in, I think he said a psychology class, so it was part of his curriculum. So my point is that I think one step to the solution is there's educational material that needs to be across the board in every state. And part of that is becoming informed and becoming educated. For somebody that grew up on the East Coast, I was not even aware of that material, and other people, that's included in their curriculum,
And the Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes experiment, I vaguely remember it. It's when she separated two groups and she told the Blue Eyes they were good and the Brown Eyes they were bad, and then the Blue Eyes started treating the Brown Eyes a certain way. Okay, yeah.
And then she flipped it.
And then
she flipped
it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
And what do you mean? Yeah.
And I think that's really what it is. It's recognizing the biases that we all have around particular things, really being willing to examine your blind spots, all of that stuff that, just being more aware and willing to have the tough conversations is what helps. And I think that it's not about guilt or blame when you are learning. It's really about reconciliation, right? Recognition, acknowledgement. Like it was this way. Because I think one of the worst things you can do is deny somebody's experience, right? Deny somebody's experience. I didn't see it. I didn't, so it didn't happen. And I think a lot of that, to your point, Blake, is that's where that pushback comes from a lot of folks who don't really understand like what's going on. You get so much like, well, the all lives matter argument. Or there's all kind of ways people try to take it in different directions when you have this conversation, but it's like, this is a unique experience that African Americans have in this country, right? And like all experiences, you can only attempt to explain it with words. There's nothing like living it, because there's so much to the perspective that you really can't see. So being open to have conversations, and a friend of mine explains this really well. He says there's three types of listening when you have conversations, right? Three types of listening. There's listening to negate, which means I'm going to listen for everything I don't like and disagree. There's listening to approve, which means I'm going to approve, I'm just kind of picking through what I agree with. And then there's listening to understand. And right now we're in a unique position to listen to understand.
I want to pick on something Joe said too about there being like a need for curriculum at in everywhere geographically, but also at every level too. The Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes thing was done on school children. Blake, I know you've recently created a master's or completed a master's program. Was white privilege part of that master's program discussion at all?
Absolutely not.
No, it was. It was in mine, and I will include in our show notes a link to the book chapter by Dr. Brian Garrity that I've tweeted and sent out this week about understanding and acting on white privilege in sports. This was part of the first class I took at the University of Denver, was sociocultural aspects of sport coaching. Frank, how about you?
There was no class in my master's performance psychology class.
Performance psychology, no discussion of
not at all.
Yeah.
Now bias, yes. We talk a lot about those things, which I think but
that's a personal bias, not a cultural bias.
Not a cultural bias. Exactly.
Yeah. And that's just crazy, man. I was thinking too, like when you were talking about giving kids the push to like try something new, like that's just so baked into the white experience is like, well, of course I'm going to go try that. Like obviously not everybody all the time, but it's much less of a barrier than I think we realized.
When from Strokes, what was so profound to me when I first got there was there was no conversation about whether you were going to college or not. It was just which college you're going to.
Sure.
Right. And that was like, I thought about that, like that's what blew my mind at first. It was like, oh, there's no doubt that every senior is going to a school. Right. And then when I got into the, working with the kids in high school in Oakland, it was like, who's going to college? It was like, kind of, maybe. Right. And so that was one of the biggest differences I noticed as well.
I was just going to quickly say that I think the only class I ever took on anything like that was sociology and sport at Cal. And now that I'm thinking about it, it's like all they did was they talked about Black people in sport. They didn't talk about anything else. And so it's kind of like, is that really your only exit? Is that really your only way out? And it's like even that class kind of almost supported that opinion. But it did address like the differences between like how white quarterbacks tend to be more common than Black quarterbacks because they're considered the leader. And there's like little things just all throughout society that we don't even understand.
But not like naming white privilege and talking about it and its influence in the classroom, just sort of this like read between the lines kind of thing.
Yeah. I don't even think they mentioned that word.
Yeah. No, I saw just real quick. Have you been to the African American History Museum, the Smithsonian at all? Any of you in DC? You haven't?
I have not.
Joe, Blake?
Can't wait.
Totally worth a trip. As soon as trips are a thing again. I'm lucky we went last year. I saw a conference presentation at a sports sociology conference a couple of years ago by the director of the sports wing. So each of the museum wings is curated by a different director. And he talked about that challenge of not wanting the sports wing to be an escape from Black history in America. Mm-hmm. That sports can't be like, oh, okay, like I'll finish up with the sports and go out on a high note,
What's up,
and so he talked about like how to celebrate the individual accomplishments of the athletes without taking away from the overall narrative of the whole museum, and just that challenge of addressing the cultural factors without taking away from the individual accomplishments. Blake, it just made me think about it while you were talking about it.
I'm glad he came in, actually. This is my oldest son.
Yeah, introduce us here.
After, come here. They want to say hi. He wants some. So this is another reason why I did the outreach too, so that they, right, because I wanted to challenge that narrative, and I wanted them to grow up in a world where they knew that they can kind of take on new stuff, do stuff that that they, may not be introduced to otherwise. He actually grew up. My daughter was 2 or so when I started. He grew up at the Boathouse, right? The day he was born, or not the day he was born, but very soon after, as soon as he come out the house, he's in my, my carrier, this little one. He hasn't been down as much because he's a little more excitable. He's kind of all over the place. I can't really coach with him there. But the beautiful thing about it, right, is I had a great family, the Hostlers, right? And this is the power of relationship, and this is what no, sit down, bud. This is what I want to teach. What I wanted to teach them, right? The power of relationship, and the reason I kind of really stuck with the sport for so long was the relationships that I built, right? And through the sport, their relationship. He actually has a boat down there now with his name on it, right?
That's awesome.
The family bought the boat, and I coached 3 out of their, I don't know how many ever girls, and so they allowed me to name it. And at the time, this one wasn't there, so I named it after my other son, Asher.
Nice.
I'm an older brother too. You get those kind of opportunities when you're older. Well, so that leads. You said a beautiful thing, and that reminded me of something else. I know you said coming into this you wanted to talk about. Tell us about the Most Beautiful Thing movie, and what you want to say there.
Oh man, let me just say, Arshay is an amazing person. I'm glad that he had the opportunity to tell his story. He has a great book, Sugar Water, and I believe the most beautiful thing is going to be his new memoir. And I'm excited to be a part of it. And the movie should be great, man. It's about, him and his buddies became a all-black rowing team in the city of Chicago. And it's interesting. He lives the story. Like I said, I kind of wish I lived. Someone came to his school, introduced him to the sport early. He got a chance to do it early, and it's changed his life. And so he inspires me to keep doing this outreach work. I know there's going to be that time I get that group that's like, we're just going to do it. This dude. This is why he doesn't go to the boathouse, by the way. Hurricane.
Hurricane.
We call it Hurricane, little Hurricane Aiden, because
awesome.
he's wound up, man. But yeah, so the movie should be great. Produced by Mary Marzio, and I believe it is produced by Grant Hill and Dwayne Wade. Common is narrating. Should be a great movie, man. Great story. Triumph. They're coming back to get the whole band together, row on the water. They came to Oakland. I had an opportunity to talk to the guys, brought some kids out, along with Anita DeFrance, and Blake. Sorry, guys. But a couple of other Olympic rowers, and we were able to, introduce some kids to some pretty cool guys and that look like them that actually were able to, be successful in the sport.
Yeah. Nice. Well, and that ties well into our next thing, which is talking about the Rowing for BLM fundraiser. We can keep that pretty quick given the chaos. But I know those are one or two of your former athletes who are organizing that now. Is that?
Yeah. So
just tell us about that.
Nia Morgan and Kelly Chung saw a need to act, man, and they did. They wanted to support Black Lives Matter, some organizations they got going on. And so they created this awesome fundraiser where they're going to have athletes, either erg or run. And you can get sponsors to be able to support you, right? To sponsor your distance, either running or erging. And I think it's a great idea. I mean, you get people who feel good and have great intentions, but not a lot of action. So I'm really excited that they acted on this rowers for BLM.
And so it's the money raised goes to 4 different Black Lives Matter organizations.
4 different Black Lives Matter organizations, and I can pull them up. Let me see. I know.
Well, we'll have in the show notes too. It's the Instagram page is rowers for the number 4 BLM, and they have all of the information there. So we'll have that too in the show notes. But yeah, feel free to tell us anything more about it too.
Yeah, I'm really proud of these athletes, man. Like they just came out of nowhere and nobody prompted them to do it. And this is the type of stuff that I think that is indicative of a real change, right? Neither one of them are African American, but they wanted to be allies and they wanted to support a cause that I feel like they saw was a battle for human rights, right? A call for human rights. And so action is what gets the ball moving, and I'm glad they did it.
And it's an easy. They're coordinating pledges via a just Google form, so you can just go if you know somebody doing it. Awesome, sponsor them. Joe and I are both going to do it too. You can pick your favorite roundtable co-host. Blake would, except that he has to move that day, so he's going to be without his erg.
Yeah, and the beauty of it is like you don't have to pre-register, but you can. You can just let them know that you're doing it if you want to go to rowers4blm@gmail.com. Just say, hey, I'm going to do it. But they have a link, a bit.ly that hopefully you can put in the show notes that if they have a sponsor, they can just have their sponsor go straight to the bit.ly and put it in. You'll send a video in via email showing that you've completed, and then they contact your sponsors to say you all done, and sponsors can give.
Awesome.
I have a quick question, Frank.
Yeah.
if I want to really make these two work and do extra meters, do I pay more?
Yeah.
Well, you probably should pay less. That way they have to, if they have a goal.
Okay. I like how you think.
I heard from some people like, oh yeah, I'll pledge you per 2,000 meters, but like I want to put a cap on it. I was like, I haven't been on the erg in a long time. I'm not going to be driving anybody broke on Saturday with my erg output. Don't worry.
Don't worry.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for joining us. It's been a great wide ranging discussion from training and everything else. Anything else you want to say before we wrap it up?
No, I'll just thank you, gentlemen, for caring and wanting.
One more guest appearance.
Right. For caring, and I enjoy having this conversation, you all. And it's important. It's very important. We're living in a very unique time right now. What time isn't unique? And what time isn't uncertain? So this conversation is definitely one that needs to be had. And I encourage you, gentlemen. I thank you, gentlemen, for doing what you can for this movement and for, diversity in rowing in general.
We're happy to do it, Frank. Thanks for making the time to come on. And I'm sure these guys will share my same sentiments. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We get together and bounce the ideas and training strategies and stuff off one another. So feel free to join in if you want.
Yeah, we didn't even get to some of our training questions, so we might have to bring it back on and talk about a bunch more stuff.
Oh, cool, man. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, Frank. That was awesome. There's a lot of good subject matter and a lot of good things that you've said. So love what we've shared on this episode.
Good. Thank you. Go Strokes.
Thanks for listening to our episode. If you'd like to follow Frank on social media, he has pages on Facebook at facebook.com/FClaytonJR and Instagram at FrankClaytonJR, and also, again, on Instagram at Rowing Strength Coach. If you'd like to participate in the fundraiser this Saturday, June 13th, make sure to check out at Rowers4, that's the number 4, BLM on Instagram, and row some meters and or put down a pledge. The funds go to 4 different Black Lives Matter organizations: the People's Program, Oakland Bail Fund, Reclaim the Block, Black Visions Collective, and Unicorn Riot. Thanks also to our sponsors, Blake Gourley and the Charles River Speed Order. Make sure to check out rowing.chat/sponsors for more info and that 30% off coupon on Blake's book. Until our next episode, you can also check out all of our older episode archives on rowing.chat.